The winter of 1945 on the Eastern Front was harsher than anything I had ever experienced. The cold seeped into our bones, and the relentless advance of the Soviet forces felt like a noose tightening around our necks. We had been pushed back into what seemed like the last defensible positions, clinging to the hope that anything could turn the tide in our favor. But deep down, we all knew the war was lost. Our unit was stationed near a small village that had already been ravaged by the conflict. The houses were little more than ruins, and the fields, once fertile, were now scarred by craters and the remnants of our desperate attempts to hold the line. We were low on supplies, ammunition, and, most of all, hope, but the orders were clear: we were to hold our position at all costs. The Soviet artillery began its bombardment early in the morning, shattering the stillness of the frozen landscape. The earth shook under the relentless barrage, and the air was filled with the deafening roar of explosions. We huddled in our foxholes, trying to stay warm, trying to stay alive. The ground was frozen solid, making it impossible to dig deeper, and we knew that once the artillery stopped, the Soviet infantry would be upon us. When the shelling finally ceased, the silence was even more terrifying. We knew what was coming next. In the distance, through the smoke and haze, we could see them waves of Soviet soldiers advancing across the snow-covered fields. They came in force, their ranks seemingly endless, a sea of uniforms moving inexorably towards us. We opened fire with everything we had left. Machine guns chattered, rifles cracked, and grenades exploded, but it felt like trying to stop a tidal wave with a handful of pebbles. The Soviets kept coming, stepping over their fallen comrades, closing the distance between us. The cold had made everything stiff and sluggish, from our movements to our weapons, and we struggled to keep up with the relentless assault. As they reached our positions, the battle descended into chaos. The fighting was brutal and desperate, a melee of bayonets, rifle butts, and hand-to-hand combat. The snow, once pristine, was now stained with blood and littered with the bodies of the dead and dying. The screams of the wounded mixed with the roar of gunfire, creating a cacophony that drowned out all coherent thought. I found myself in a trench, fighting off a Soviet soldier who had managed to break through our lines. He was just a boy, no older than me, but his eyes were filled with a fury I couldn't match. We struggled, our breath steaming in the frigid air, until finally I managed to overpower him. But there was no time to think, no time to process what I had just done. The next wave was already upon us. By the end of the day, our position was untenable. We had lost so many men, and the Soviets were closing in from all sides. The order to retreat came too late for many of us. Those who could still move scrambled to fall back to the next line of defense, leaving behind our dead and wounded. There was no time to bury them, no time to even say a final goodbye. As we retreated through the snow-covered forests, I couldn't shake the feeling of doom that hung over us. The war had become a nightmare from which there was no waking. We were no longer fighting for victory, we were fighting for survival, for the slim chance that we might live to see another day. But with each step, it became harder to believe that we would ever escape this hell. The Eastern Front in 1945 was a place where hope had died, and all that was left was the grim determination to keep going, one foot in front of the other, until the inevitable end came. We had fought for so long, sacrificed so much, but in the end, it seemed all for nothing. The Soviet juggernaut was unstoppable, and all we could do was delay the inevitable, paying for each delay with the lives of our comrades. As night fell, and we continued our retreat, I looked back at the burning horizon, where the battle still raged. The flames lit up the sky, a stark contrast to the cold darkness that surrounded us. In that moment, I knew that the world as we had known it was gone, and whatever came next would be born from the ashes of this terrible conflict.